The biggest problem, we face two kinds of problems in the country. We have the problems from the outside, in particular the Islamist threat, which Iran is a part of. But probably more destructive to the country than the threats from without is the fact that from within we've lost touch with the values that the country was founded on, particularly the constitutional values of preserving liberty, individual liberty. You can't make this kind of a government work unless you understand and adopt or endorse why we have the kind of governing framework that we have. And I think the biggest challenge that we face is getting people to buy in to what our foundational assumptions about government are. It seems like the country's kind of lost touch with that, or lost the, I don't want to say the capacity, but lost the conviction that those constitutional values need to be upheld, and they really are what our liberty depends on. And if we don't have that, and liberty erodes, then we're obviously living in a more authoritarian time. Yeah, the unfortunate thing about that is that the things that you can do quickly are the legal and political things. You can pass laws, you can change candidates, you can change office holders, but the problem in the country now is actually more cultural than legal or political. And when a culture takes 2 or 3 generations to get a certain way, you can't undo that in a week, because basically what you've done is you've kind of seeded the infrastructure that breeds culture to people who are no longer bought into the American ideal. And I think we can change that, but it's got to be a determined and sustained effort, and it's going to take a very long time. The longer the time goes on without more public proceedings and more public accountability, the more Benghazi recedes into the background, and it gets overwhelmed by current events. So even though it's an outrageous transaction, the problem is that we have a fast-paced society. We're entering into an election cycle where the big story is going to be the 2016 election and who the nominees are going to be. We have a plethora of other political problems and issues to deal with. We have wars to deal with. We have, the rise of not only national powers that could be hostile to the United States, but a weaponized nuclear Iran. It's very difficult to keep public attention, no matter how important something is, on an event that took place a long time ago, that was treated at the time that it took place as if it wasn't that important. That is the way the administration handled it. And that has really kind of faded to black, thanks very much to a sustained effort by the administration to stonewall information about the attack. And other than a few honorable exceptions like Fox News and some of the websites, really the uniform disinterest of the American press, which has been breathtaking in what happened in Benghazi. So it's hard to resuscitate something years later that was treated at the time that it happened as a not very important event, at least in terms of the way the government handled it. You can't treat something, as I think the Romney campaign did with Benghazi, as if it isn't a great moment in the stretch run of a campaign, and then 2 years later come back and tell the country, on second thought, this is the worst thing that ever happened. There were mistakes made with respect to Iraq that were far less malevolent than what went on with Benghazi, yet they were treated as if they were war crimes, virtually, and certainly, there was whispers about whether they were impeachable offenses or not. And here you have the situation in Benghazi, which is just an array of almost unbelievably atrocious government misconduct and dereliction of duty, beginning with an unauthorized war that both parties, frankly, were pushing for. A war that was not authorized, that was not in America's interest. In fact, it was against America's interest because the Gaddafi regime at the time was being held out, and the State Department, this is the State Department talking, not me, it was the government that said Gaddafi was a key counterterrorism ally of the United States. So a policy decision was made. It was a bipartisan Beltway policy decision made to abandon our alliance with Gaddafi and to empower the anti-American jihadists that were attempting to topple him. That was followed up with a series of unbelievable missteps with respect to security of that facility in Benghazi, which, by the way, we still don't know why we had to have Americans assigned in what is one of the most dangerous places in the world for Americans. The failure of the administration to come to the aid of Americans under terrorist siege at the time of the attack, the massive systematic misstatement, misrepresentation to the country about what caused the attack and who carried it out, and then the trumping up of a prosecution in violation of the First Amendment against the producer of the video that they basically made the scapegoat for the whole thing. So, you know, I think when you describe it and you consider what happened from beginning to end, which is really looking at about 2 years of conduct, it's outrageous. But at the same time, it's again in the rearview mirror, and it's very hard to get people focused on.